There is a socio-religious line of thought in Africa that goes thus: if men could buy life, the richest would have bought it for themselves. From there, they go on to list some rich people they know of, which are mostly the rich and politically mighty of our time. Well, there goes a flaw in that statement. I dare say that if life could be bought, the ancient kings would have taken captive whoever produced it. The rulers and warriors of time past would have ran a mafia of the entire distribution. The wealth of the then world was mostly and easily accessible to those with the most brute force. The best things of life were reserved to those who could conquer and pillage. Chinese dynasties, Roman and Greek civilizations all expanded by making good of their military might. At the top of the military food chain were the kings and generals. If life was for sale, well, we probably would not be here to know. With that perspective, going into this video, we are going to be exploring the rich life of kings and rulers of the ancient time. This is Opulence Luxury, where we discuss the luxurious life of the rich. And this time, we are throwing it all the way back. Back to when Wall Street did not exist, the idea of an electronic calculator would be hyper-crazy talk, and a gunpowder was the best a man can get. This is our list of the richest people in history. But before we go back in time, do well to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications by clicking on the bell so you will be prompted to our new videos. Cosimo de Medici, 1389 to 1464, Florence. Cosimo di Giovanni de Medici was an Italian banker and politician who shaped the political culture of Florence in his time. His wealth and affluence enabled him to establish the Medici family as effective leaders in Florence. He wielded so much power in Florence, so much wonder he was not the chief dictator. That was because the legislative council in Florence was always resisting his proposals, and so he was more like a premier. A first among equals. He was even exiled at some point in his life, but more on that in a bit. Cosimo was an avid art lover, and he showed it, spending over 600,000 gold florins. That is about $500 million when you adjust for inflation on art and culture. Most notable is his commissioning of the first freestanding nude male sculpture, which is David by Donatello. He was undeniably moved by arts, learning, and architecture. The Medici family, which is from him, by the way, supported Renaissance artists like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Botticelli. Cosimo inherited two things from his father, Giovanni de Medici. One was his prowess for banking. Two was the wealth that came from it. That is after you have counted his strategically arranged marriage to Contessina de Bardi, the daughter of another rich European bank owner. Being this powerful, he could back cardinals for the seat of the Pope, and in some untoward instances, threaten bank debtors with excommunication. With his power, he could control the votes of people in office. However, his hold on Florence was rejected by some who would later imprison and subsequently exile him. But within 1 year, the capital flight of one man taking his bank with him was a great deal to the economy that his exile decree was lifted. At the height of his wealth, he was worth an estimated $129 billion in today's money. Basil II, 958 to 1025, Turkey. If we ran a trivia and asked for your worst nicknames, you most likely won't come up with one as scary and wacky as our next entrant. His nickname was the Bulgar Slayer. Basil II was a Byzantine emperor who spent his days fighting wars and expanding an already large empire that was handed down to him, or he more like schemed his way to the top. He flourished from his trade in silk. With such force, it was uncontestable to have a monopoly on anything of his liking, one of which was the prized purple silk of his time. a fabric he was born into, literally. Wars bring in money after they have cost money, and Basil II had a large treasury to match his endeavors. He levied an annual revenue that was more than 200,000 pounds of gold. To his credit, though, when you compare him with other rulers of his time, he did his best to live a modest life. He was on the war front with his soldiers and led his campaigns himself. His shrewdness led to the treaty he negotiated with the Doge of Venice, which ensured the financial future and stability of his empire. Upon death, he had amassed a fortune of about $169 billion. Marcus Licinius Crassus, 115 to 53 BCE, Rome. It just keeps getting cold with these guys, and our next guy may or may not have a heart. This will help you decide faster. Businessman Marcus will show up to a burning house with a fire brigade and make an offer to put out the fire if only the owner sold him the house at an impossibly low price. Dubbed as the richest man in Rome, our Roman corporate CEO started his statesman career as an army commander. At the right place, at the right time, when Lucius Cornelius Sulla Felix was auctioning off the prescription properties of his victims in the Roman Civil War, Crassus was allowed the best of the lot at yet again low prices. He had investments in ventures like slave trafficking, production from silver mines, and speculating in real estate. By that, we mean buying burning houses and adding people's names to whatever list will make them lose their possession. There is an unverifiable story that has it that at Crassus's death, the enemy poured molten gold into his mouth, which was significant for his unbridled thirst for wealth. Haters will hate. In his defense, Crassus developed the first Roman fire brigade when others were busy doing, I don't know, any other ancient stuff that was unworthy of our history class. Crassus's wealth is estimated by Plutarch in his book, Life of Crassus, to have increased from less than 300 talents to 7,100 talents. No, not the measure of how Yo-Yo Ma is skilled in playing the cello. Talent is silver money. And you can chalk up all his talents and gold to $169.8 billion in today's value. Alan Rufus, 1040 to 1093, England. Another defense contractor on the list. His nickname was Alan the Red. His hair looked like every bully's favorite mark, but make no mistake about him. Alan had an occupation profile that read Earl. That meant he had rulership over a fiefdom, a position that was granted him by his uncle, William the Norman Conqueror of England, for his loyalty. Alan was the first Lord of Richmond, and Richmond was a key fiefdom in Norman England. Owning and running the 250,000 acres of fiefland put his net worth equal to 7% of England's gross domestic product. In 1086, Alan Rufus was one of the most powerful men in England. From his riches, he donated large sums of money to religious organizations, and even founding the Benedictine St. Mary's Abbey in 1088. It was tragic when he died in 1093 without any heirs, leaving fortunes worth about $195 billion to his brothers. William the Conqueror, 1028 to 1087. England. What is it with these people and wars and terrific nicknames? King William I was a descendant of the Vikings and the first Norman King of England and the Duke of Normandy, and a bastard. This same illegitimate son of his time had leadership thrust into his hands when he was all but 8 years following the tragic death of his father. From such age he had to fight, and boy, he conquered. Upon ascension to the English throne, he made good of his position to generate enough revenue that puts him as one of the richest rulers. William I ordered the compilation of the Domesday Book, which was a compilation of all land settlements in the English islands. This was an innovative form of taxation that meant that each person paid taxes proportional to what they owned. He claimed all the land in England for himself. Once in his possession, 25% was given to the church. He kept 20% for himself and gave the remaining to his close friends and allies, including our Alan the Red. With all the lands under him, everything on and under the land belonged to him, while he also carried out some giant constructions on the land, all of which helped to generate money for him. From records available in his Domesday Book and other records, his net worth can be pegged at $228 billion. Jakob Fugger, 1459 to 1525, Germany. Give way, Medici. Here goes another Wall Street banking guru. Jakob Fugger, or you can call him Jacob the Rich, was a true businessman. He was a famous banker for the Habsburg dynasty and pope backer. His contributions funded kings and popes, financed wars, and propelled the Habsburgs to a place of prominence in Europe. His interests spanned from banking to mining to trading. Aided by the lack of antitrust regulations in his time, the Fugger business operations had an almost monopolistic grip on the European copper market. Apparently by omission and not by commission, Fugger, a Roman Catholic to the core, was a disruptor by his decision to loan out money for the building of the St. Peter's Basilica and other Vatican structures. That singular action teed off a domino that led to the 95 Theses of Martin Luther. Fugger had institutions like the Vatican and kings and their kingdoms as his clients. He is regarded as one of the richest men to ever live, with a net worth estimated in today's money at about $400 billion. Mansa Musa, 1280 to 1337, Mali. With all due respect to the richest people in our world right now, none of them can disrupt the economy of an average country by just giving out from their wealth. It is the story of a man and his legendary wealth. King Mansa was rich, and to describe his wealth, his contemporaries described his wealth as not being able to describe it. Mansa Musa was king of West African Mali when demand for gold was at an all-time high, and Mali was the largest producer in the world. In his history-defining and always-to-be-referenced pilgrimage to Mecca, King Musa traveled from Mali with 60,000 companions and 12,000 slaves, with each carrying 4 pounds of gold. 80 camels carried 50 to 300 pounds of gold dust. Months after he passed Egypt en route Mecca, his almsgiving and generosity caused an inflation. Adjusted for inflation, Mansa Musa would be worth about $415 billion. Genghis Khan, 1162 to 1227, Mongolia. Close your eyes and imagine being the one in charge from China to Europe. That is a reality some mortals like you have lived in, minus the social media and fussing over climate change anyway. Genghis Khan makes a case as one of the most famous military strategists in history. Bearing title of emperor in charge of an empire that spanned from China to Europe cannot be small by any level of comparison, but he pulled it off. Remarkably, even though he had such a win under him, he didn't make a big deal of it. As emperor, he did not build palace, temple, or tomb or house. Being emperor meant there wasn't any line between personal and state resources. Everything and everyone was as the emperor pleased. For an empire that was worth well over $1 trillion at its peak, who did he take his austerity classes from? There wasn't even the feds or anything preventing insider trading. King Solomon, 970 to 931 BCE, Israel. This guy, what exactly did you read or hear about him? He married many women. He didn't fight any wars. He built a giant temple to God. He is the wisest man to have lived. He spent his days writing some revolutionary quotes, and He also got entangled with many more women. King Solomon was soaked in luxury from cradle to the grave. A golden throne we can all try to relate with, but a golden footstool? Solomon, you are just opulent. King Solomon was king of ancient Israel for 40 years after the passing of his father David, and for each of those years he got 25 tons of gold as annual tribute. Other sources of wealth included his business trades and tributes from Arabia and Levant. He was so rich, his wealth made silver a regular rock. Estimates put his wealth around $2.8 trillion of today's money. Augustus Caesar, 63 BCE to 14 CE, Rome. Remember the quote, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar"? Yeah, it's this Caesar. At some point, he owned Egypt like property, and many years after Caesar is still coming after what you are holding. Augustus Caesar was the first Roman emperor, and his newly begotten empire controlled many of the most powerful states in the world, that included having Egypt in his personal portfolio. Egypt at that time accounted for 25 to 30% of the world's GDP, in part because of its sweet agricultural land. If Caesar was still around today and collecting everything that belonged to him, he would be worth about $4.6 trillion. Now you see why I said that line of thought at the beginning is flawed, right? These guys were rich and they had a grip on a lot of things. Tell us what you will do with that kind of money and power, and which other ancient rich people you know about in the comments. Thanks!